Hey there hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Now, one of my biggest complaints with gunning in 5th generation of Monster Hunter games is that we keep getting monsters with more and more HP, but we never get any more ammo, and it's getting kind of annoying. Here in Rise, you have quests with multiple monsters that have upwards of 100,000 HP if you're playing with groups, but when we had monsters that only had about 12,000 HP, we could still carry the same amount of ammo. We definitely didn't get 10 times stronger. And this is getting a little tedious to constantly having to go back to camps to restock. Melee users don't have this issue, they have infinite whetstones now. But anyway, getting back to the point, I'm tired of using elemental ammo in group hunts because I have to constantly restock and change ammos for each individual monster in an inflicted quest. You don't really have to do that with raw ammos so much because you get to carry a lot more ammo with those. But I wanted to fix this problem. So we're going to be building a set that's based around the royal bowguns that can use all the elemental ammo. This way we can effectively tackle multiple monster hunts, potentially without needing to restock. And honestly, in some of these 3 monster hunts online, I haven't really had to restock, which has felt pretty good. Of course, nothing is without its downsides, since we can't have everything, right? Now before we get into the armor set though, I just want to point out that since I'm making armor sets for all elemental ammo, obviously we would excel at none. These bowguns typically have a downside on their own. The light bowgun can't use pierce elemental ammo, which is a shame, but honestly not that big of a deal. It has all the elemental ammo with rapid fire, but no walk and reload, which definitely isn't a deal breaker, and it wouldn't matter since it's the only bowgun that really can use all the elements anyways. Don't look at Strax and Arwa's bowguns, those are traps. Of course, we will be making a heavy bowgun version, which will have much more significant downsides in that it can't walk and shoot on its elemental pierce, which is really bad. But we really don't have any other options. Sure, the jelly heavy bowgun has the normal elemental ammo, but that's straight up inferior to using the light bowgun with rapid fire everything. There's no real reason to run the heavy bowgun in that case, since you can't really use setting sun with normal elemental anyway. Like I said, these definitely aren't going to excel at everything, but since we'll be focusing on using these setups in groups, it shouldn't matter that much. Onto the setup now. Like my previous videos trying to make the ultimate shield heavy bowgun setup, this video will completely abuse the Armor Augment system as we really can't have all the elemental bowgun setups without running elemental attack 5 for all elements, right? Nah. But unlike the shield video, these sets actually pump out pretty good damage, and typically we only miss a few points of skills from an otherwise meta elemental bowgun set. Starting with the heavy bowgun setup, as we go down this armor list here, you can see that we're adding all elemental skills via the Armor Augment system. So you'll notice that this armor set is pretty much identical to the meta elemental setup. I just ended up having to change around a lot of the armor augments to go full elemental attack up, because it's so many slots to put in. So I did have to abuse the system to take off certain skills and add a bunch of D tier skills for all the elemental attack ups. But other than that, I mean, we're not really losing much. Obviously, we're going to be losing some attack up that we would normally augment for our armor, but this way we're just being able to run all the element, which is kind of the whole point. So yeah, well, obviously we're still going to be running a God Charm for this, just because that's the only way we can really cram in enough skills to make this worthwhile. But the set is going to be the same for the light bowgun and heavy bowgun. You're just going to be swapping out the rapid fire up decorations for redirection for heavy bowgun for the most part, and then the sets are pretty much good to go. So as you can see, we pretty much have all the skills that we would normally have for an elemental setup. You know, we have attack 4 instead of 7, but we have Wex, Crit Ele, Spare Shot, Coalescence, MO up, even redirection, all that good jazz. Dereliction is kind of bait here, unfortunately. Yes, it's very strong and it makes our numbers much bigger, but the HP drain on heavy bowgun is kind of cancerous for online lobbies, since it basically means you're always going to get one tapped. You can run attack 7 instead of dereliction by swapping out the Arcfiend pieces, but I figured that we're already losing a good chunk of damage by using these all element setups and not going min-max into one element, and I'd like to just keep some of that damage. So we have to rely on redirection to keep us alive, unfortunately. And since the bowgun doesn't have walk and shoot, it's a lot riskier than it needs to be. That being said, this whole setup is kind of a meme anyway, so we might as well pump some extra damage in, right? We don't have any issues running the dereliction setup for light bowgun though, for sure, because the Arcfiend armor pieces also have those bigger slots to let us fit in rapid fire up as well. Plus, light bowgun users, you really shouldn't be getting hit by attacks anyways, so the life drain should be pretty much a non-issue. Heavy bowgun doesn't have glide as well, so with that HP drain, you pretty much have to rely on redirect, which is just awful. But this setup is pretty much going to be our standard elemental setup, which is redoing the augments to be more absurd so I can cram in all the elemental 5 skills, is basically what you can see here. So I'm sure some of you people are thinking, well, what's the point of this? Why not just swap at camps or restock ammo? Well, two reasons. One, I personally hate farcastering mid-hunt to get more ammo, especially in an online lobby. It feels like I'm kind of abandoning the group, so that doesn't really sit well with me. But also, I don't like having to go back to camp after each monster, change the bowgun to match the elements, and then change my item layout to that setup, and then change the radial menu for all that. It's rather annoying, especially in a 3-monster hunt, so I wanted a bowgun that can handle pretty much the whole hunt that wasn't a raw MO. And sure, there may be some hunts where I do end up having to restock, like if 2 of the monsters have the same elemental weakness, sure. Or if one of the monsters isn't good for element, like Goldrathian, it happens. But this still does cover almost all bases, and it felt really solid too. So really, I just wanted to make this setup so I can have a general purpose elemental setup, so I didn't have to go out of my way and restock and go back to camp and change weapons. This setup also does really good against the arena quest where you have 4 monsters in, and typically you will be able to handle most of them with the elemental MO. Sometimes some of the monsters share a weakness or just aren't really good for elemental MO in general, but being able to tackle most of the monsters, in an online group without having to swap out your weapon does feel pretty good. And while I was going to make a budget version of this setup, I ultimately decided not to. It just didn't seem worthwhile because we're already performing worse than like running a single elemental setup, and it's utterly min-maxed, and so I don't think a budget version would be really worth it, as it's probably faster at that point just to go to the camp and change. But yeah, it is possible to run all the elemental MOs. It's not really probable due to the Armor Augment system and how it works. Is it necessary to run this setup? No, pretty much never. It's not really optimal in any situation, but it was a fun idea to do and to make the set for. So I'm kind of happy with how it turns out, and I'm surprised that I really don't have to sacrifice much to get this working. But that's all from me, I guess. Thank you all for watching, and good luck out there, hunters.